much to our readers. And just so you all know, their stories will be in their complete form in the anthology that's going to be released in a couple days. That's called What Does It Mean to Be White in America? And there are handouts up here that have more information about that book and how you can purchase it. The stories that it contains are tentative and personal, but part of our individual striving toward truthful discussions about our future. We hope you'll look for this anthology and allow the stories to trigger your own memories and questions about the realities of race in our nation. So we're going to move on to a Q&A section of this session. And just as a reminder, you all do have evaluations, so if you don't mind filling those out before you leave, you can hand them to Beth in the back, or you can leave them by the back door. Okay. If you need one, you can see Beth for that. So if you have a question, we'll have 2 mics out in the audience. So please just raise your hand and we'll come through. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Thanks for being here today. And you may have addressed this early, I got here a little late, but I just wondered, what was the tipping point for you, each of you or some of you, in terms of doing this work? Was there an event or a set of circumstances?
Wow, that's an amazing question. Obviously, we haven't thought of it before. I'll try and answer it. I think it was an evolving process for me. And it came to a head with the project I was working on a couple of years ago when I was attempting to understand how to think of my heritage in a more in-depth and honest way. So I think that there was not a tipping point. It was like, this is time to do it. Yeah.
Speaking for myself, yeah, there was never an epiphany. Certainly my story, or actually it was kind of like a series of epiphanies, would be probably more accurate to say. Certainly my own story that I shared with you does represent an epiphany for you, or for me, which would be probably one of the first realizations that I had about how people can put on this very charming little face and can justify some really truly heinous behavior and attitudes. And that everyday people that you would not think of as evil people or even bad people, can fall for this stuff out of fear. And it was a real aha moment to realize how easy it is to manipulate people with fear. We see a lot of that going on now, for example. So it's definitely a work in progress for me.
The piece that I wrote is actually about an imaginary epiphany. It's called How I Became White, thinking as if there were one day where I suddenly realized it. And it's not completely false, at least the way I told the story, but I feel like it's a series of sort of epiphanies about it. What's most important to me right now is that I'm listening to lots of folks of color who said, you know, we're tired of educating you guys. Can you please do some of that yourself? At some point, hearing that enough times brought me to a place where I felt like, so what would it look like for me to be educating other white people? And that's where I find myself painted into an uncomfortable corner, standing on stage here.
Speaking of uncut,
you know, in some ways, I think today is, and doing this is the epiphany. I can't think of particular moments, but I think writing this piece for me was an investigation, and also hearing about whiteness, the whole whiteness concept, and looking a little more inward has been a new way of seeing things.
I think there were other questions in the audience. Hi. Get to the mic. Thank you for being here. The content of your presentation really touches me. It goes to what I would say is the heart of the project, the Whiteness History Project. It's very educational. I have a question about what I think I heard you say. Something about redefining what it means, or redefine being white. That kind of struck me a little bit, with white being everything you laid out as this, really this false thing that you've laid out. What does it mean to redefine white?
Can you help us by asking who you want? Because
That was my line.
That was my line, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's, I'm on this like lifelong exploration / action journey, like I'm exploring, educating myself in concert with others and trying to take action in the community. So redefining, I mean, for me, I had to, I'm an immigrant to this country, so everything was like, what is going on here? The first divisions I noticed were divisions along the racial line. And that's what, I wrote that in my piece a little bit, and I didn't understand why, because I was clueless about the history of this country. So all these years I've spent learning about the history of this country and what it means to be white, and how I just like came into this stream, like midstream into this river from Europe, which, is the cradle of whiteness, obviously, but I had to understand as an immigrant. So for me, I feel a responsibility as a white person to do racial justice work here. At the same time, I also feel a separation between my history and my story and living here, because this is not my history, this is my adopted history, living here. So I have to hold all those together, like, so I don't know how to, but I would like to see, I like to pick the examples in history where white people have been on the right side of justice and have been allies to people of color and have fought for justice. And I would like to be able to hold the complexities together of the terrible things that white supremacy, that white people have done in the name of white supremacy, and at the same time be able to say, you know what, I want to be on the right side of history with people who have fought for justice. So it's like that kind of understanding and that kind of redefining that I'm doing in my mind, where how do I want to move in the world from this point forward. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think so. I think I hear you saying taking it out of something negative and harmful, maintaining the word and turning it into something more justice-oriented. That's what I think I hear you saying.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this. I'd like to respond briefly to the interchange we just had, and then I have a quick question. I heard your question and I thought, yeah, that feels to me a little dangerous, and I'm not sure what I might mean by it. And I guess my idealistic goal is to do the social justice work that I do, and my goal by the end of my life might be that a few hundred white people had decided to do something different as white people. And that's not a very big goal, but I sort of see that as if there's going to be a redefinition of whiteness, that it means that many more of us give a hoot about thinking about race. And so that's sort of, I wouldn't want to redefine it in any way that didn't feel uplifting. And the question I have is, in terms of concrete actions taking away from this day, do you have any specific kind of, this is something you can do tomorrow or today to counteract your own internalized white sort of superiority?
I want to channel my friends who I've listened to, who organize in the community, I trust their judgment, and they would, probably one of the first things they would say is organize, like get into a collective, be with a group, don't just be a solo agent, because we're so socialized to be individualistic. We can do so much more as organized people to change the systems, to completely uproot the oppressive systems in which we exist and which we perpetuate.
So yeah, on that, also that question of redefining whiteness, I'm wondering if you talked a lot about the deeply oppressive history of like white ancestors, but I'm wondering if what you think about looking to kind of the pride of not whiteness but European ancestry, and also just that it seems like Jews are able to do that in a concrete way now because Judaism is still alive and active in practice, but it seems like harder to do with other, ethnicities.
Yeah, I can answer that. So my project, my installation project is all about that. It's all about looking at my family, going back all these years and learning about their positive characteristics that I can claim proudly, and then learning about the negative, harmful too. And so learning about the wholeness of my family is really powerful.
I guess I would just say I don't think it serves anyone to demonize anyone else, and it's that fine line of being honest and not getting into a self-hatred thing. And I worked for many years in the Multnomah County booking facility, and I had the interesting experience of fingerprinting many white supremacists who were riddled with swastikas and crosses, and actually a number of whom said to me that this is when I was younger, I am so, that they were embarrassed by that or they had moved on. So that was always encouraging, but, but certainly not everybody. And I wanted to say to the people who were saying, talking about white culture and white pride, although, it definitely repulsed me on a gut level, but yeah, why not? You've got freaking Viking ancestors. I mean, they were pretty amazing. They built these boats, and everybody has gifts and everybody has something in their past to be proud of. It's just like the whole disingenuousness of David Duke, on the one hand, we have this heritage, but it came down to hating black people.
Exactly. I would say there would be such a difference between being proud of your heritage and embracing your heritage and then having disgust and hatred for people who have a different heritage than yours. Or almost as bad, just ignoring it completely, like it doesn't exist. Like you think that you're so myopic that you think that there is no other heritage other than your own, and so are either openly or subtly hostile towards other kinds of ancestries and backgrounds. I think it's a matter of inclusiveness more than it is having shame. It's just like, yes, like gosh, we're human, people are different, they come from different backgrounds, they have different heritages, and that's wonderful.
I have a little bit different feeling, which isn't intended to negate necessarily anybody else's ideas, but I think there is nothing redemptive about the history of whiteness per se. I do think we have to look at it. But if I think about my ethnic heritage and the stories that I know or my family has forgotten, for me that's separate from the construction of whiteness, which is a thing that was made and a thing that can be unmade. Just like my presentation as a male, though it's not perfect to match oppressions in that way, is constructed around me, and I don't think we need to necessarily hold on to it or be proud of whiteness per se, but I can say, hey, you know, my grandmother came from Poland, or my great-great-grandmother, and I can appreciate that, but not because she's white, and not even because she's European, but just because she has a story to tell. And so for me, my project is to completely dismantle the concept of whiteness, which, you know, won't happen in our time frame, but that's the only way I can have any logic about it.
Thank you, it's me again. And thank you for saying what you just said, because mostly I was struck by what sounds like a bit of confusion between the concepts of white people and whiteness. So yes, please, as a person of color, as a black person in particular, I would love to see the dismantling of whiteness. So thank you for saying that. My question is, how would you address folks that are concerned with being shamed or feel shamed or guilt or, you know, those words? How would you speak to folks on that line?
I can answer that or try to answer that. So in my project, again, I'm sorry to keep referring to that, but my goal is really to look at to remember that these were all good people stuck in situations of oppression and training and learning things from their family and being hurt by their families, which is why they acted in these oppressive ways. Now I've lost my train of thought, but that we are all, you know, deep down good people who sometimes act in ways that are not helpful. I don't know. And so when a white person feels badly about what they've done or what their people have done, it's important not to get stuck in that, because it's not going to help. It's just going to make them act racist even more, because they feel that, and it comes out in other people. Anyways, that's my attempt to answer your great question.
It is a really good question. Not to shame you or any of us, but I don't think everybody in our history was necessarily a good actor. I mean, I think I had a couple of real, you know, jerks in my family without going back to the old country, and that, you know, I think sometimes we know we are benefiting from a situation and we stay silent. And I think, for me, part of the answer to your question is be brave. Stand there and don't accept everything somebody points at you necessarily or throws at you, but, you know, keep an open mind, be brave, and see if you can work through it. You know, there might be something to learn from it.
Thanks. To delve even more into a thing that I'm hearing, I'm struck by the questions of family. We are socially conditioned by the family in which we are raised, the situation in which we are raised, and then this emotional content that comes before reason, that comes before a desire to find one's history, to analyze, in a way, one's upbringing. Could you even address even a little more deeply the struggle between one's family and the picture of reality presented by one's family, and as one grows and becomes more aware of self? You know, Beauvoir said, woman is not, you are not born woman, you become woman. And I find that as a very interesting and difficult dynamic to address the emotional content of what I was certainly taught, to love my family and the content of jerks in one's family, one's immediate family. Not so much the historical, although the genealogy, the whiteness of the system of genealogy is something we can analyze, we can look at to live within the system of whiteness before one comes to an understanding of the difference between emotion and analysis. I don't even know if I'm saying this right. Does this strike any, does anybody have anything to say about that?
I'm not sure what your question is. I mean, I heard
The
about
question is
emotional
about,
content.
immediate family tension and existing within one's immediate family. Do we just separate ourselves from our family of jerks?
Sometimes we have to give them, listen to them enough so that they can hear themselves and hear what they're saying, and we realize that it's not true what they're saying.
I think sometimes you do have to separate yourself from them. Just from my own background, I was raised by parents that were actually pretty liberal. However, my grandparents were not that way at all. My step-grandfather, my mother's side of the family was a dentist in Racine, Wisconsin, who flat out refused to serve African Americans. Just wouldn't even, would not even deal with them. And there was just absolutely no convincing him. And I can remember as a young person, sometimes needling him about it, and sometimes just asking him about it, actually just really curious, what on earth was going on in his mind. And he was just like, I don't like them. And that's all he would say. And then he would change the subject. So, there are certain people that if they're going to meet you halfway, and you can probably have some dialogue with them, and maybe everybody can foster a little bit better understanding. But there are some people, as time grew on, I just lost more and more respect for him. And finally, I just couldn't talk to him anymore. It was just too repulsive. And my mother felt the same way. So, it was very sad. Because, I think he remained that way till the end. But, I think there are certain people where you're just not going to change their minds. And they're just not going to budge.
I think we have time for one more question.
Thank you. I had a friend who transferred to the University of Oregon, where I attended college, from South America. Not South America, South Africa. And she said that she wasn't Black until she moved to America. And whenever she spoke to her family at home, she would mention something about being Black. And they didn't like that very much because it was this American thing, they said. And so my question was for, I forgot your name, but on the end. Yeah, that is right. My question was, what was it like immigrating here and adjusting to the labels?
I mean, like I said, it's taken me so many years to really understand the complexities. And I may have not thought I was white before I moved here, but then I actually started learning about what's going on in my country, and there's a lot of racism there too, and the predominant group that gets targeted is the Roma, the Gypsies, and so I actually also grew up indoctrinated into white supremacy, even with Jewish ancestors, even with family of Holocaust survivors. I still was indoctrinated into white supremacy. So for me, but it's a different kind of history here. So it's taken me a long time to really hold all those complexities together and to understand. And so my my antidote is to learn about those and to face those square on, and to do work in those areas. Like I went back home to the Czech Republic and I worked on a fellowship with Roma organization to learn about the work that they do and to support them, just to be like, okay, to understand white supremacy in a different context and how it affects people and what people can do, So I'm just saying that it's helped me understand it more globally.
Can I respond to that one too? Working with folks from the Middle East on the census form, oftentimes there's no real space to mark yourself as a race or ethnicity. And having talked to a few folks, they mark white. And having found after a few years that they were not treated perhaps the same way that I would be. So that's part of a real experience of how the categories are chopped up. My own personal experience, I was in Belize. The opportunity for me to go to Belize is part of the privileges that I have from being from this system. But that was the first time I realized that I wasn't white, though not the way that you are in the United States if you're white here. What I mean by that is that having spent a lot of time in Latin America, I was spending time talking to dark-skinned folks from the Caribbean who spoke English, and I felt none of the weirdness that I feel here, no matter how good my intentions are when I'm interacting with African Americans here. I feel like it's in the air. I feel like it's in the water. It's not something we're just good enough to make go away. It has to be systematically deconstructed. And while we're talking about immigrants and refugees, PCC is about to eliminate a 37-year program that serves immigrant and refugees. It's kind of a bridge support program. There's an article from the Bridge out here. It's called the Volunteer Literacy Tutor Program, and it helps folks who struggle with barriers, especially language barriers. And I wanted to make sure that folks in this audience know that we can talk about how whiteness is operating right now here at PCC.
Thanks. Any quick final thoughts from our panel?